get an idea in the middle of a thought, I'll run off on a tangent. This went on for years. I could have these doors locked and talk to you at this mic for 5 hours straight until you drop dead there. But I've organized my thoughts basically around the theme that everything you know about school is wrong. Let me just ad-lib one thing. Someone spoke about a fear of standardized tests, and Chris correctly said they measure nothing. They measure obedience, they predict averages. Has to be measured by achievement. That's real achievement. You've walked from Tierra del Fuego to the North Pole, as a close friend of mine did. Admitted? Absolutely. You started a charity. You've invented something. You've written a novel or a group of pop songs. You've achieved something to get into Harvard or Princeton or Stanford or Caltech. And let me give you a little bit of evidence for that. Last year, Princeton turned down 4,000 people who submitted perfect SAT scores and perfect grade point averages. Stanford turned down 2,800 such people. Caltech, couple of thousand. All of the universities that are considered great, if we had a week, I might challenge whether they're great enough, but nevertheless, the ones we consider as great disregard this tomfoolery. The tests measure nothing except obedience, and people who define themselves by obedience don't make big contributions to the college, because they never get in the position to do that, nor do they become famous, which is like wearing a billboard that said, I went to Princeton. So they're second raters in the estimation of Princeton and Harvard. And I have that directly from the admissions records, so that they use more genteel language. On the other hand, Princeton took in a kid with a C- average who had invented a sport that had only one participant, himself. And he measured his current performance against his historical performance. So the feedback from today's rod, in a minute you'll hear when he invented, was measured against last week's. The sport he invented was seatless unicycle riding over broken terrain. They knew they had a winner, and that kid applied. Now at this point, I should also tell you, I'm from a little coal mining town in western Pennsylvania. My dad said, always tell people you're from Pittsburgh, but really it was 45 miles from Pittsburgh, Monongahela, Pennsylvania. And any football fans in here know that Monongahela, a town of 4,000 coal miners and steelworkers, produced Joe Montana. What you may not know is we have the only reliable domestic market in the world because our people lead meaningless lives, are bored most of the time, and try to buy their way out of the hollow feeling that engenders by purchasing things and eating a lot. 3 days ago, the New York Times said that 200 million Americans are overweight or obese. I'm certainly accomplishes this in many familiar ways. By lying about reality, by teaching that everything is difficult without an expert telling you what to do, by starving the young of experience from which judgment is learned, by teaching that other people are dangerous and untrustworthy. School is the first impression kids get of society, and first impressions are often decisive. When the government did. This is a direct quote from Mr. Rothman. In our dreams, people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present education conventions of intellectual and character education fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own will upon a grateful folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into men of learning or philosophers or men of science. We have not to raise up from them authors, educators, poets, men of letters, great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, statesmen, politicians. We have an ample supply of all of those. The task is simple. We must organize children and teach them in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way. In 1901, it's 110 years ago, in a book called Social Control, which I urge the curious in here, ask your librarian to get it for you. I guarantee you it's not hard to find. The legendary sociologist Edward Ross wrote this, quote, "Plans are underway to replace family, community, and church with propaganda, mass media, and education." Of course, I'm in schooling. People are only little plastic lumps of dough. Another insider, H.H. Goddard, from the Space Center, his name. He was chairman of the Psych Department at Princeton. Called government schooling, quote, "the perfect organization of the hive." And he wrote further, quote, "Standardized testing will cause the lower classes to confront their biological inferiority, sort of like wearing a dunce cap. In time, this will discourage reproduction of the ants in the anthill." First, curriculum was dumbed down. Then national testing was inserted. Then morality was ruled out as important. I hope you all know that the word pedagogue is Latin for a specialized class of slave. Tell me how, over thousands of years, that categorical label for a class of slaves would translate into the people you turn your children over to. They didn't even have the decency to relabel